Hi and welcome back to the Early Bird Photo News. Last week I encountered quite an annoying issue with one of my R5 cameras. I was out in the field photographing pale-headed rosellas feeding on these awesome red flowers when suddenly the R5 would just completely freeze up and nothing would work anymore. The red light on the camera just stayed on and it was basically just a brick. So I took out the battery, the camera reset and I could shoot again. However, fast forward a couple minutes, it would happen again. The camera freeze again, completely. I couldn't do anything. Fast forward a couple minutes, it will happen again. And this happened 5 or 6 times in a row, basically ruining the whole shoot, which was super annoying. I went back, grabbed a couple other batteries, put a new memory card in, trying all different things, trying to quickly undo the battery group, putting it back on. And I started shooting again. The birds were still there, luckily. However, it would happen again. So frustrating. And the most frustrating thing was actually what I didn't realize at first, but later on, that it cost me a lot of images. Because whenever I took a burst and then the camera would freeze, all the images I took prior to the camera freezing that hadn't been written to the card yet were lost forever when I took the battery out. So now I had this camera that I couldn't really trust anymore. I'm like, what the heck is going on with this thing? I never had any issues with this camera in over 3 years, and now it's suddenly doing this weird stuff. So I went home and I remembered that my friend Glenn Bartley told me about the problem that he had somewhere in the forest in South America as well with his R5, and his culprit in the end was most likely some dirty contact or the battery grip. So I took out the battery grip on my R5. I cleaned up every golden contact that I could find. I took out the batteries, put in new batteries, cleaned out every other contact on the camera. I cleaned out the contacts in here. I put it back together and I'm happy to report that now the last week the camera has worked perfectly fine again and I had no other issues since. So I'm not entirely sure what caused this issue, but it was very annoying because I lost so many images, and you don't want it to happen to you in a situation where you're actually photographing like a super rare subject. I think it has to do likely with the battery grip and some contact coming loose in there. After thoroughly cleaning all the contacts and taking out the battery grip and putting it back on, the problem seems to go away again. So there might be a little recommendation for you guys. If you're like me and you never take the battery grip off, maybe it's worthwhile taking it off like every month or two, cleaning it a little bit and then putting it back on. So hopefully you never encounter this weird freezing issue in the field. Have you actually ever had the same issue where the camera just suddenly freezes and you have to take out the batteries for it to work again? And if you did you also lose the images that you took in the previous burst, or did it write all the images to the card first? Over the last few weeks, I've enjoyed editing a lot of my old images with my presets and my masterclass workflow, getting much better results now out of some of these old files. And this week I continued with this, and I must admit I really love the new Photoshop generative AI feature. It's not working perfectly yet because to get the best high resolution results you can only really use a square of like 1200 by 1200 pixels, so any larger work ends up being lower quality, but you can already see the potential of this amazing tool. If you use it in a small area at the moment, it already gives you amazing results. Have you used that feature yet, or have you played around with it yet? I must admit the beta version of Photoshop is quite annoying to use on my Mac because it just does weird things from time to time, sometimes doesn't let me save the images, but using that generative AI tool definitely makes up for some of these issues with the beta version because it's such a good helper, and I'm looking forward to that being available in the full version of Photoshop. And even if it costs some extra money, I think it's definitely worthwhile having that feature because it will make our life in terms of cloning so much easier. What are your thoughts in general about using these sort of AI tools? I think for something like cloning or moving things or adding a little bit of canvas, it's fantastic. I'm not going to add rivers or mountains in my background, but for little small jobs, it's such a great time saver. Although I must admit, I also use it for YouTube covers where it's fantastic. Again, generate things for me or sometimes just generate a whole new background for YouTube covers. So I'm already using this feature a lot and it has helped me a lot already. I often talk about my masterclass where I teach you everything you need to know in Photoshop, and a lot of you guys have asked whether it's still up to date because I filmed it a little while ago. And I can guarantee you it's still completely up to date because I don't rely on any fancy sort of AI features or anything else like that. I rely on layers and layer masks and teaching you the basics on getting the absolute best out of your photos, like curve layers, selections, selective colors, the liquefier, and a lot more. So if you want to learn all about image editing and getting the most out of your images with a fantastic, easy to learn workflow, make sure to check out my masterclass down there in the description, and it's definitely still up to date. And of course, I've also linked my pro sets for you in the description that allow you with just one click to transform your RAW files to a fantastic starting point for the editing process. It looks like Sony just loves releasing smaller cameras and kind of mixing features from the larger bodies into smaller bodies. And there seems to be a release coming soon of an A7C Mark II and an A7C-R. One will have around 33 megapixels and the R version will have the 61 megapixel sensor from the A7R5. So again, two interesting cameras in a smaller body, and I just wonder at some stage, what's the point of having this many small bodies? Do people buy all these different cameras? Have you bought an A7C, for instance? Talking about Sony, they also seem to have decided to do something quite odd with the A6700, shipping it with no USB cable and no charger. So if you buy the camera and you're new to the Sony system, you won't be able to charge it, which seems very strange, and it doesn't seem like items that would raise the costs by so much that you couldn't include them. So very odd choice there, Sony. It being summer now in the Northern Hemisphere also means that it's quite slow in a news cycle and an announcement for new cameras, but I think once we head into like August, September, October, the news cycle will definitely heat up and we will hear some more exciting announcement and hopefully also more announcements about the R5 Mark II that will likely come sometime in 2024. So far, it seems like we will also get an R5C Mark II alongside or a little bit after the R5 Mark II will be announced, which is an updated version of the current R5C, the cinema version of the R5. And while I personally don't really use that camera because it doesn't really work for me as a full hybrid shooter in the field, I think a lot of people have liked that R5C and hopefully will be interested in seeing an update as well. Have you been using an R5C or are looking forward to an R5C Mark II? Let me know in the comments. There's also been an interesting rumor that Canon will launch another awesome f2 zoom. We already have the awesome but very big and expensive f2 28 to 70mm lens, and so we're likely going to get some other lens, maybe a 70 to 135 or 150 or 180mm lens f2, which I think would be a fantastic lens and definitely something I could see myself using unless it just becomes too big and heavy. So maybe it being a little bit shorter would make sense so the lens doesn't become too huge, but having an open aperture of f2 can be fantastic. Last week we talked about the issues that some of the Z8 cameras seem to have with the lugs for the straps coming loose, and we haven't really heard an official statement from Nikon just yet, but apparently according to Nikon rumors, Nikon is asking their retailers to check the cameras that they're actually selling, like put a strap in and pull hard and see if it somehow comes loose, and I guess if it comes loose they'll have to send it back and Nikon will fix it. So hopefully there will be an official statement with Nikon at some point, but at the same time, in my opinion at least, because I never use straps, this doesn't really affect the camera in general. It's just sort of an inconvenience that if used wrongly can definitely damage your camera, but I also think a lot of people never use the straps, so actually use the holders on the lens rather than the camera. So for many people this issue will never actually be an issue, but it's just something to be aware of, and hopefully Nikon will find a fix to it soon and can sort out that problem so no one has to be afraid of actually dropping their camera. There's some great news for everyone who has been pre-ordering the new Nikon 180 to 600mm lens because it looks like it's going to start shipping next week. I had a great time with it in the field when I used it a little while ago, so I'm really curious to hear from all of you guys how you're enjoying it in the field once you actually get it. This week we also have an image of the week from one of my channel members, Dan, who photographed this awesome hummingbird in flight amongst all these beautiful flowers. Such a cool image, Dan. Thanks for sending it in. And if you want me to show some of your images or actually edit some of your images, make sure to check out my channel membership on my profile page, where for a small monthly fee you can join the channel, directly support me and get some cool membership perks. So check that out. Let me know all your thoughts in the comments. Give me a thumbs up for the video and smash that subscribe button, and I will see you in the next video very soon. Bye guys.